Hi everybody, it's Naomi here from Tokyo Creations with another art journal page for you. So today I'm creating in my large Dylusions journal, and I'm starting here with a Natalie May Collage paper called Jessica, and I've already ripped off the side of half the side of the collage paper, and I'm just putting it onto my page here with some gel medium underneath and over the top to make sure that it's stuck down nice and flat and it is sealed on top. So then I'm just going to trim off the excess, and this is a great collage paper. It's got some lovely script and marks on it, and I do rip that up here once I get that straight edge ripped off, and I put it onto my page in random spots just for some extra background interest here. So when I started this page, I had an idea of just doing some ombre hair onto this girl, and that was all I had. So here I am just using my pencil just to draw in some hairlines. And I am really loving the Dina wakley paints for face colour and shading. And I'm using the apricot and blushing here. So I just use quite a dry brush, just a drop of water in there so that it doesn't soak through, but just so I get a bit more movement. And I'm just going in with that apricot straight over the collage paper. And I have fast forward so you don't have to watch the whole thing. And I did realise later on down the track that I forgot to do her neck. So we'll come back and do that in a little bit later. But I'm now moving on to the blushing. And I kind of blend the two as I use the blushing here just to create the shadow above her hairline, around her face, around the chin, above her lip, and around her eyes and her nose. These two colours, I pretty much don't use any other colours on the face if I want that Caucasian look, because they are just work really well. I got that tip from the lovely Neve Bailey, and it is fantastic because I'm not the best at making my own skin colour, so these two colours are fantastic for that. So I'm just giving a bit of colour around those eyes where we have our darker tones. And then I do get in a bit of a line. I haven't fast forwarded this part because I thought it was important to show you the shading. I know it has been something that I've had to learn along the way, so I have wanted to keep that in there to show you. So I'm adding that darker shading in around her nose, and then I'm going back in with the lighter shading. So I'm just going between the two colours. If I do a little bit too much in one area, I go back over it with the other one. And we will be adding some shading with some other products later on. So now if you're not sure where you should add some shading on a face, just Google face shadings, or just look at a photo of a face on Google and see where the light hits it. So we normally hit it around the high peaks, so on your nose, the chin, your cheekbones, and just below your eyebrow as well. But it is something that can be difficult to learn. So here I've grabbed the lovely new colour Raspberry, which I absolutely love, from Dina wakley, and I'm just colouring in her lips here. And then once again, I'm just dipping my brush back into those other colours again, just to create a bit of lightness. And I did overdo it here, so I go back in with the Raspberry, and we will add some more shadow to that. But it just makes it look a bit more 3D than if I just put one colour. And Nat's done all the work for you here in these faces for the collage paper, because all the details there, you just need to colour it. So I had an idea to create some kind of gardeny ombre effect, like a garden lady. So I wanted her hair to start off this bright green and then go down into the blues. So I'm using a dry brush here, and I've just started with my two colours that are closest to each other, and I think that one's lime and then Sky, I think it is. And so I'm just adding one colour, not changing my brush, dipping into the other. So it's got, that effect of the two colours, but it also flows down. So as I move down here, I start to use more of the blue than the green. And then I keep doing that as I change into my different colours. So here I'm using the new Sapphire. Now, because this was a bit of a darker colour than the previous one, and I just needed to extend her hair across the next page there. So that's what I was doing. So I really did need to go back in with the Sky to make that ombre effect happen. And I've continued through with Night as well. And then I'm doing the same effect here on the background. I decided let's use warm colours on the background, and I really wanted to use some of the new colours as well. So this one is Iris, and it's one of the new release colours. I'm being pretty careful around the edges there, just so that I don't go over her hair. And then I move into, I think that one's Fuchsia, and then Ruby is there. And I'm going backwards and forwards between the two colours just so I get that effect. And remember, this is the underlay colour, so it wasn't really important that it was blended well, but just that I had enough coverage. Then I used magenta, and then that one's Rouge. And then we went into Tangerine and finished with Lemon. So I've got such a good contrast between my warm and cool colours here. And I knew I wanted to do stenciling in the background as this project developed. So I'm bringing that Tangerine back through across into the Rouge, just so we get that nice blend. And then I'm doing the same with the Lemon into the Tangerine. All right, so now we're starting the mark making. So I'm just using my finger with some white acrylic paint in 3 spots. I think I ran out of paint there. In 3 spots, and it wasn't a particularly warm day here. If it was too warm, I would have had to do 1 spot at a time, but I took the risk and went with 3 spots. And then I'm using Natalie May's Wheelie Madness stencil, and I'm just taking off that white paint with a baby wipe. And I really loved that effect on there, especially the part behind her hair. And here I've just gone over with a bit of heather through, it's a Funky Fossil stencil, and I think it's called Focused or something like that. It's from the range that Nuneka designed. And so here I'm going with some fuchsia, bringing a bit more depth in that darker colours here. And I'm using the same effect with the baby wipe to remove that colour through the stencil. And I'm using Natalie May's, I think this one's called Loopy Loops. I can't quite remember. I should know because I use it all the time. I should have started with that section there first because it did start to dry. So some of it was a bit difficult to get off, but that's okay. And then I've got the Just Cool Marks stencil, which is also Natalie May, and I love this stencil. I use it all the time. So I'm just using a makeup sponge, and I'm just going over those 3 sections of those paint stripe kind of marks there. And then I'm going back in with that focus, and I start putting a bit of depth in with the black. And when I started up the top, I was like, I think I actually want to frame the whole page with this. So I started in 3 sections, and then I'm like, nope. And I have to say, when I watched this video back, I didn't like that part in the middle, and I don't know why I did a bit in the middle, because I normally would stick to the edges or, tying it to something else. But anyway, we'll just go with it, and you can see how some people like mistakes and then just run with it. I was certainly not going to start again after I'd done so much work on the girl. So I'm just adding a bit more of that depth through those stencils. And then I'm coming back in with this Just Cool Mark stencil and adding those awesome crosses, which I use all the time, again with the white. And I'm going over the other stencil bits that I've done, just layering them all up just to give some cool effects. And then, of course, we need some splatters. So I've got that white and that black out, and you probably can't see it very well on the camera, but I'm adding some white splatters under those 3 sections that I added the crosses. And then I'm going to town by the looks of it with the black splatters and wiping it off her face. So once that's dry, I grabbed out a cool, it's the Writing on the Wall stamp from Art by Marlene. I use this one all the time. And I'm just using that paper towel to make sure I don't get that in her hair. And I'm adding it into, well, I started with 3 sections and then I went to town a bit more, but I've linked that stamping to where I use the black stenciling. And then I wanted to do my quote. So it was, being different gives the world colour. And I was thinking of using the Dina Wakley Alpha stencil, but it was too big. So I've gone with Natalie May's grungy alpha stamps, and you can see here I always start at the back end of my page. I knew it would fit, but I didn't want it to be too awkward, so I started at the back and moved forward, and same with being. And then I knew I would be doing some handwriting because there's just no way that would all fit, but that's okay. I think it's pretty cool when you do 2 different types of writing. So I've just gone over there with a normal pen, and then I'm using my black acrylic paint pens to give it a bit more thickness. And then I'll leave that to dry while I continue working on the face. And this is where I realised that I hadn't coloured her neck in there. So before that step, I used a black Stabilo or pencil just to frame her face. And then I'm going to activate that shortly. So just following the same steps I did with her skin on her face with her neck, just those 2 colours, apricot and blushing. So here I'm activating that Stabilo or pencil to frame her face. And it was a little bit too straight for me, so I went back in a second time with a aqua pen just to give it a bit more roughness to it and to blend it out a little bit more. And then I also framed her hair as well, just to give that depth, so it separated her from the background. Now here I'm using a charcoal pencil, and I love using a charcoal pencil to add shadow to my face. So you can't quite see it, but what I'm actually doing is I'm putting in some lines and then I'm rubbing it off with my finger. So it stays on there, but it's more of a shadow than a line. Her eyebrow I was deliberately heavy-handed with, but if you can see there, I'm adding in her cheekbones, her nose, and her eyebrows will come into shape here just by adding a tiny bit of that charcoal pencil and smudging it with my finger. All right, so now I'm starting on these vines I had in my mind, and I've just freehanded, I've just drawn a line, and then I move into just painting on some leaves, and I'm using Dina Wakley's Evergreen here. And then once that's dry, I do highlight all the leaves with some lime just to give them a bit of a different colour. And there's no rhyme or reason as to which way I add the lime onto there. It's just so that the leaves aren't one colour, to make them a bit more realistic. And then while that's drying, I'm going around my stamping with a white acrylic pen just once, and then I'm adding some into her eyeball and into the iris of her eye, plus a little bit to her lips. And then I'm just using a Uniball black pen here, and I'm just outlining those vines and then giving some detail to the leaves. So I'm just going around the leaf, adding a line in the middle, and then putting some stripes on one side. It is a bit hard to see because it's so far back because it's such a big page. So here I had an idea of putting some white dots through her hair, and I started with my acrylic paint pen to add the lines, and then I used my Art by Marlene lace to add the dots through her hair, and then I'm using Mermaid to add some berries, plus the gold plate to add the gold to the berries as well. And that dries with some texture. So I hope you enjoyed that process, and I hope it inspires you to have a